Hello everyone, welcome back to the Self-Taught Artist Curriculum. Today, let's get all the info out of the way first. So as far as supplies go, same supplies that we've been using. We've got a pencil sharpener, a kneadable eraser. I have my 4B pencil, I have a Palomino Blackwing, and I have my white pencil because I'm working on toned paper. If you're not working on toned paper, you don't need the white pencil. So just kind of a quick recap of what we've been talking about because there's been a lot of concepts in this chapter so far. And I think one of the biggest things to get from all of this is just this idea of line weight. When we're creating a drawing, we don't always have color, and we do have value to play with, but we don't really have that color that is a really good way to inform depth and dimension in a painting. A big portion of it does really come from line weight. So for example, in a drawing, something that's in the background or disappearing, or you want to push it back, the lines are going to be very light and there's going to be less detail. As you get closer to your focal point, it's going to have a thicker line, a darker line, and there's going to be more detail. So with this idea of focus, that brings us into today's lesson, which is all about rhythm. Now, rhythm in your drawing can both benefit you and hinder you, depending on how and when you use it. A great example is if you have multiple identical forms in a row or in one area, it starts to look really predictable and fake. If you have a bunch of clouds that all look the same, or a bunch of grass that you have just doing the same thing over and over again, that's not what real life looks like, and it begins to look artificial really quickly with that kind of repetition. Now, on the other side, you can also say, for example, you have a line of dots, and then one of them is raised up. That one that's raised up is now immediately your focal point. So the repetition of the other dots is really playing to that one dot that you were making its focal point. So in that sense, repetition can really help draw your viewer's attention to what you want them to look at. If your drawing becomes too repetitive or predictable, it looks mechanical and artificial. But on the other end, the lack of any rhythm and repetition will create this very stylized look, which can also be very distracting and almost give you nothing to look at. So two ways to kind of view it and think about it, that rhythm can help in that it can help identify your focal point. It can hurt you in that a lack of repetition and rhythm is really hard and distracting to look at. And too much repetition and rhythm can also look very fake. The principle of rhythm is to create this hierarchy of what you want someone to look at and what you maybe want them to just kind of breeze by. The way we do this in our drawings is basically everything that we've talked about up to this point, and that is thin lines, thick lines, straight lines, curved lines, lost edges, found edges, light, dark. All of these things up until this point that we've been dissecting and kind of working on individually play to how we can break up but also use rhythm for a benefit and to really just get maximum impact and liveliness in our drawings. So just some things to think about and become familiar with as we progress through all of these drawings and further coursework is just remember these concepts that make artwork sing. Whether or not you feel like it or not, all of us can relatively, at some point, render a perfectly photorealistic drawing It just takes time and breaking it down pixel by pixel and doing it. But I think what makes a great artist is not this ability to copy, but the ability to interpret. So we can all be looking at the same thing, but these little decisions that we make that feel different or look different from one another, that's what creates your own unique voice. And it's a little bit of you in that drawing or painting. And it comes back to how we interpret and play with all of these things on our own, because we all have our own way of viewing the world, feeling the world, seeing the world. And once you progress, you start to kind of realize that like that's where your voice can come in as an artist. And that's how we can all be looking at the same things, but come up with very different results that feel very true to us. And that is art. That is how you become a great artist. With all of this said, you know your supplies, so let's get into some drawings, okay? Okay, as usual, you are going to have your reference image pop up right here, and you can follow along with me, or pick your own that you like. I'm gonna do a warm-up, and you're gonna do a warm-up with me. And it's gonna be more of a line drawing. The point of it really is to warm up and just kind of get feeling our lines again, in case you're like me and it's been a while since you've drawn something. Start off basic shapes. You know what, I'm just gonna do like, okay, there's that. I'm starting so light, so I do apologize if you can't really see what I'm doing yet. But I'm just going in, I'm getting basic shapes down, keeping things very light so that, you know, I have a lot more to play with down the line. As we continue, I can choose to push things deeper, but it's a lot harder to lighten stuff up. I don't know about you, but I'm so glad I'm doing this warm-up. I can tell that I need it. I'm feeling really rusty right now, but that's good. That happens. That's part of being an artist. Let me know in the comments, are you keeping up with this course? And like, were you ready to move on for this one, or did you take a break like I did? I'm trying my best to do everything I can in regards to like making sure I get this accurate, but also without getting in the way. Here I'm just noticing some like quintessential shapes that tend to make up cat heads. So if you see just kind of like a random circle, that's just me telling myself, like just putting a generic shape down to get everything right. It's getting better. So at least we have that. Okay, I'm just lightening some of these up now that I have that drawing. And just kind of like a rough outline of where everything's gonna be. I just wanted to erase it so I make sure that I really do keep this very light. So remember, the purpose of this drawing really is to understand lightweight or line weight, and making sure I don't want to go too dark too soon. So I'm going in very lightly, and I'm just looking at specific shapes right now. I'm not thinking of this as a cat. I'm thinking of it as just a compilation of black and white lines that happen to come together and show a drawing. So break everything down into shapes first. So that's a relatively good outline. Now I just want to go in very carefully and fill in these little lines that are in there. I'm going to do it pretty carefully so that we don't get too over complicated. Like, I want to keep it very clean. Breaking things down into shapes the best I can, given that this drawing is very tiny. A little far back. That shadow, sorry if you were following along. Again, just to make note of the fact that, you know, as we're getting into this more detailed sections of the drawings, but it's more detailed on this end, it's getting looser as we go back here. All right, a very rough and ready drawing, but a drawing nonetheless. And we showed up and we got the first one done, which is always just a sacrificial drawing. I don't care how good you are. The first ones are usually sacrificial drawings. So with that, let's just move straight on into the next one, which was like really the one that I wanted to practice for this lesson. In this one, we are going to be thinking heavily on what information can kind of be condensed and simplified. Where can we make these repeating patterns more obvious to give the impression of the texture? And yeah, so let's hop right in. I will try my best not to get in the way. Draw my little box. There is a lot to unpack in this drawing, but do not fret, we'll get there. I'm just drawing some of the initial lines. I'm trying to be really confident with it in a sense where I'm not fussing too much over the drawing, and I'm looking for shapes above all else. Trying to keep everything as light as possible because we do have some disappearing lines that we can play with, disappearing edges. I guess I'm trying to be confident but light. So I'm being decisive in my line work, but I'm not pushing down super hard and committedly. A little tip that I do with that little glare on the eye, I always make it bigger than what's in the image because it's so easy to begin to encroach in that and then you really lose the radiance of it. So I always err on the side of caution and I go bigger with the glare so that if I happen to kind of move in on it, no harm, no foul. I'm definitely looking for my shadow shapes here. I think personally, one of the hardest things about drawing birds is getting their beak right. Okay, so then the other thing with this shadow that I'm drawing in that's underneath the bird, let me erase it and do it again. What I really want to think about with this, it's really important that you get the angles of the shadow shape correct because that is basically telling you what those underlying forms really are. Beginning to draw on some of our shadows. Let's blur our vision and squint. As we progress with this drawing, ultimately all your construction lines that you're using to make up this drawing should, in theory, eventually disappear. And what I mean by that is that yes, you use them to tell yourself, how to create and unpack this drawing. You'll just develop the drawing enough that they just become one with your artwork. Again, just keeping things super light right now. We'll add in the texture later. Right now, we are just concerned with getting the shape of everything. So as I was saying, our construction lines that we've put down eventually will be absorbed into this drawing. We're gonna keep shadow shapes relatively flat, and I want you to stay focused on the quality and expression of your lines. We're gonna push the accuracy of small lines and small things until it feels like we've captured the sense of our drawing. This is not a lesson intended to generate a perfectly hyper-realistic, photo-accurate drawing. We're looking for artistic accuracy and really enhancing the quality of our artistic voice. And we do that by playing with all the things that we've talked about in the lessons. Due to the nature of this drawing and how we know how this goes, I'm going to jump in with my white pencil now because we realize how important that is to do while everything is still really clean. Again, if you're on white paper, you're not doing this. You're just making sure that you save these highlights for the very end. So the reason I picked this drawing, which is what we're about to get into right now, is the feathers. Let me get this eyeball drawn in and then I'll talk to you about the feathers. The feathers look really intimidating and they are a very repetitive motion. So this is where we're gonna look into, just breaking things down. So for example, back here, let me just kind of explain first. There isn't need for much detail in these feathers in the back. Right? They're kind of there. They're just kind of like loose, undefined, versus some of the ones that we see up here are very defined. And we do have more kind of specific lines in relation to them. So those, I want to be more careful about drawing the nature of feathers. So let's start up here. Again, it's a little bit hard because this drawing is so small. It's kind of hard to get all the detail that I feel like it needs to truly demonstrate this, but hopefully you get the point of what I mean by, just making sure. Really, I just hope that you get the point of what I'm trying to teach you. Okay, I'm gonna go back to my other pencil. Now that we have a few more values in there. Another thing that's really good that you can do with drawing is you can key in your drawing. And so what you do for that is you put in your lightest lights and darkest darks. You do want to be very careful that you're putting it in the right areas. Wow, my hand slipped. Whoops, hopefully. Oh no, it might just have to live like that. Dang it. That's a bummer. Dang. Okay, well, I will have to deal with that as we get closer. But back to keying in. So you're just keying in your lightest light and your darkest darks, and then you can fill in the gaps from there, but then you have a better read of exactly what values are in relation to one another. So let's see if I can salvage this a little bit. So then the other thing, again, with this little part of the eye, you can see how big it is in relation to the reference. It's quite a bit bigger, but I would prefer that because then I can easily just like go into it and kind of make it more and more subtle. So I'm keying in some of my darker values. Trying to make note of, again, texture, so anywhere I can add just like a little bit of texture is going to be really important in the long run. There's some nuances in these shadows, and I'm exaggerating it for you a little bit here so that you can kind of see. You'll see how we push it, but ultimately, when you squint, there really isn't that big of a difference, so just be cautious and be aware of that. Like when you stare at a shadow shape for a long time, it'll look more varied and dynamic than it really is, but remember it's still in shadow, so yeah, keep those values close to one another. With my pencil, I'm adding texture back into the feathers. So overall, we're just pushing and pulling. We're going back and forth, double checking, reestablishing relationships, and for another example, as we move further back this way, there's less detail as we move this way in the drawing. So I'm not really going to put much emphasis right there because there really isn't much. I'll deal with the wing in a second. I really just want to get turn my pencil to the side to get kind of greater coverage. And ultimately this wing is kind of, it's a really similar value to the page, but a little, just like ever so slightly darker. And there's some lost edges right here that I want to make sure. So before I go any further, I am going to blend this so that we just kind of get a more solid base. I want to kind of see what that looks like. Drawing ambiguous shapes because those shapes aren't that important. And remember, I'm drawing this really fast because I don't want them to be so long that they seem daunting, but feel free to take more time than what I'm taking because, you know, I'm rushing a little bit and it shows. But again, I really want to get these kind of through with so that you can move on and do your own drawings and like just kind of get to it. I want it to be attainable. Yeah, so even if my drawings aren't that great, you can take more time. I want you to get through watching me so that you can just get to doing it yourself, I guess is what I'm trying to say. So let's go in. I am going to add just like so I'm just adding some of that variation back in. You don't need to spend 3 hours of your life watching me draw. I want you to see me draw and do the exercise, and then you go and take the time that you need to get it done and to revisit it and do all the things. So Two. The other thing I have to tell myself is not to get too greedy. I just had a moment where I put that white pencil. That's me getting a little bit greedy. Again, take your time. I'm condensing this for your sake and trying to get through it pretty quickly, but for you, it's more important you take your time. If it takes you multiple hours, great. Take your time, try to get the detail, really focus on your line work and the story that you want to tell with your lines and values and decisions with your drawing. So from here, we're gonna do a few more on my Patreon, which is where all extra drawing exercises go. I kind of put the main stuff here, but if you want more follow along drawing exercises and soon to be painting exercises, that's all on my Patreon. So I hope to see you there. The link is in the description box below. As far as this drawing, let's take a look at it. Let me look back. Okay, it's not bad. My initial response there is, as always, there's things that I like, things that I don't like. I do really like the light part of the drawing. I like that in the light value, you can see texture, there's detail, there's decisions made that really give you this sense, like this tactile sense of the drawing. There's clear distinction between light and dark. The things that are in shadow were kept in shadow, the things that are light were kept light, and it's just more defined and crisp, and which I think altogether poses a really great image. Now, looking at it, the beak, I think I maybe went a little crazy with the white pencil on this lower, on that part of the beak, which is gonna happen. It's gonna happen with any drawing unless you're Jeffrey Watts or, I don't know, one of the greats that probably can just do this effortlessly, but I still make mistakes, and I think most people probably do. And that's, again, just part of it. So I would say the beak needs a little bit of work. There's like structurally, got a little smushed. That white goes way too far that way, and he completely lost his chin. His chin is gone. Okay, so thanks for sticking with me through that. Little adjustment. I like it better. Definitely, definitely better. He's not like, he's more like an actual bird. Anyways, no, I'm just being ridiculous. Next lessons. So, what's coming up? Well, in upcoming courses, we're actually gonna be, we have kind of a few more lecture ones, but we also are going to go through then an entire chapter that's just drawings. Again, most of those will be on my Patreon, but I am excited for that. Less talking, more doing. But I did want to give you kind of the conceptual understanding and just some things to think about and be able to return to so that you can go through this many times, hit that drawing intensive session, and then, you know, see where you're at, go back, recheck, re-familiarize yourself with these concepts, go back to it, and yeah, so on and so forth. An endless supply of drawing exercises, but there's going to be a few more exercises in this rhythm section. So if you're on YouTube, thank you so much for joining. If you're on Patreon, I will see you in the next one, and we'll continue this with a few more drawings. And regardless of which platform you're watching this on, thank you so much for joining, and I can't wait to see you in the next one.